This is OFN NFL Preview for Week 11. NFL season the Week 11 begins about 27 hours from now, 28 hours from now. So it's going fast as we are now at the point of the season where we take a look at the playoff standings. And of course, the AFC has a ton of teams in contention, which we thought would be the case when the season began. The NFC, meanwhile, is pretty much a joke. Anyway, how's everything going, Mark?
Everything's going pretty good, Greg. We're getting closer and closer to beginning to formalize what could be some NFL playoff teams. As you mentioned, there are 6 teams in the AFC that are 6-3 or better.
Yes.
So, there's a lot of teams jockeying for position, and this will be indeed a key week as to filtering out the NFL playoff positions.
And the team nobody wants to play in the first round of the playoffs, the Patriots, are 2 games back, and they're 3-0 against those 6-3 teams that they're chasing. So if they have to get into a tiebreaker with any of those 6-3 teams that they're chasing, they're going to win those tiebreakers. So, and then in the end, and it's interesting because we've got games this week, which we'll get into in a little while, where it took me, I was going through these games, the Bengals, Washington game and the Cleveland Philly game, and I'm going through everything as usual. And it really took me until the very end before I spotted it. And I said, wait a second. This is the NFC East team versus the AFC North team. So we're dealing with a team from the worst division in football against a team from most likely the best division in football. So what am I doing? Of course I'm taking the AFC North team. What am I, crazy? Thinking about taking 2 teams for the NFC East? I'm not doing that. So,
no.
But that's the thing too that we always have to throw into the mix, which we don't talk a lot about. Maybe we should talk more about it, but I think it's because we don't really figure these things out until about this time. Got to get at least through half of the season when we really start finding out which divisions are better than other divisions. And I think that definitely comes into play. Look, if Buffalo doesn't get the Hail Mary thrown against them against Arizona, the week before that, the AFC East teams were beating the NFC West teams, and they almost did it again. I think that means something.
Yeah, well, it does mean something. Just look at the NFC East teams in games that they played outside the division. I believe they're 1-15-1.
Something like that. Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah, there's 1 win, okay?
Yeah.
Against teams outside of the NFC East. So until they can prove different, you obviously want to fade these teams when they're outside of the division and make some cases for the team, and that would be one of them, my former hometown, Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, that was a crazy way to end last week's game. It's I hope these players get, okay, if you want to do that, fine. But it was like just on the edge of, okay, I don't have, yes, I had Cleveland. Yes, it affected me a little bit. No, I did not have Nick Chubb on my fantasy team, but I understand why he did it, and he probably did do the right thing. But that was just on the cusp. If there's 30 seconds left, 25 seconds left, score the touchdown. The game is over. Don't even think about it. And if you're up by 2 scores, don't even think about it. Because I get the feeling that that's what we're going to see next. We're going to see a player that's going to, I'm going to show everybody that I'm smart, and I'm all about the team. And I'm going to run out of bounds at the 1-yard line with 30 seconds left and a 2-score lead. I know it's coming. But, that really must have killed just imagine having the Browns in that situation. And everybody's talking about being in the Browns side, but how about your heart coming out of your throat if you had the Houston Texans in that spot? And then the dude runs out of bounds and you probably just faint with glee that you can't believe that you just got that lucky.
Well, it all circles around, obviously, what we're talking about, Greg, and that's the point spread, somewhat to fantasy football as well. But we're not having this conversation if there's not a point spread in the football game. No, we're just saying he did the right thing. Okay, yeah. He closed the door on the Houston Texans. in doing that. He closed all possibilities of them to win the football game, which is what he's supposed to do. So
Yes.
it was indeed a brilliant move on his part. A lot of people in Vegas who bet the game didn't like it. Some loved it, and others could care less. But I think it was the right move on Nick Chubb's part for sure.
All right, let's talk about Thursday night football as we always do. And we mentioned this last week because we liked Indianapolis and they came through big time beating up on Tennessee. And that is that the Thursday night, and this has been a completely different trend this season, but the Thursday night football road team has been dominant this season. They've won 6 of 9, covering 8 of 9. So you just have to think that it's just one of those years because of COVID. And there's no other explanation why the Thursday road team would have so much success. Now that sounds like it's a good deal for Arizona, and they're on this hot streak, and they get the Hail Mary and so forth. But you get these winning streaks, or we've seen this in the playoffs. We saw it with Minnesota a couple of years ago. We start with Pittsburgh with the immaculate reception. That you get these really big plays at these big moments. That does not mean anything with next week's game. Nothing. And if anything, sometimes it's like, okay, you've reached the pinnacle either of your season or during a winning streak. That's your pinnacle. You've now hit the Hail Mary. You're on a whatever. You're on a nice little run, even though they lost the week before, but it was like a big homestand. It's the end of your homestand. It's a big win. You're in first place now, mathematically. And I just get the feeling that now you got to go on the road to a Seattle team that doesn't lose very much 3 in a row when you have the Pete Carroll, Russell Wilson combination.
Well, you've got that, okay, and you've also got other, I think, extenuating circumstances which might make it very difficult for Arizona to get out of Seattle alive Thursday night. Number one, Arizona's taking to the road after having been camped at home for a month.
Yep.
3 consecutive home games spaced with a bye week in between. That's a very, very difficult task to get your road shoes on and go play, especially on a short notice. If it's a Sunday, you've got a little more prep time. It's one thing, but this is a short notice to do all that. That's being crammed into finals, if you will. Number two, you've got an Arizona football team that has scored 30 points or more in each of the last 5 games in a row. Now, in the newsletter, we called this out, we put it in the database, and we found out that teams in this role, you score 30 plus 5 games in a row in the National Football League, they're just 14 and 29 to the spread when they're coming off a win.
Okay.
Which is a role for Arizona here. So those are, to me, are 2 high hurdles that they're going to have to get over in this game against a very angry Seattle football team whose season looked like it was on cruise control, and suddenly they've downshifted and they're throttling downward right now. They need this game more like blood. I think that they're going to be the hungrier team in this football contest here than will Arizona, who is playing well. There's no question about that. But I think this is a real good spot for Seattle Thursday night against Arizona.
Yeah, let's also keep in mind that these two teams just played on Sunday Night Football, and Arizona won that game in overtime. That was so to beat Seattle again. That's something that doesn't happen very often. And matter of fact, Seattle has covered. They're 7-1-2 against the spread their last 10 on Thursday Night Football, and like I said, you get the combination of Carroll and Russell Wilson have very good spread numbers after they've lost a couple back-to-back. The only thing Arizona does have going for them as far as trends, the major thing they have going for them is that they've beaten Seattle 4 of the last 5 times they played in Seattle, covering the last 5 in Seattle.
Yeah, they feel pretty comfortable about boarding that plane and landing in Seattle. There's no question about that. But off of that Hail Murray on top of it, okay, the sensational way in which they won a football game, they turned a loss into a win. I think they're feeling pretty giddy, and I think the champagne popped in the locker room after that game, much like it was a playoff win, per se, if you will. I just think there's way, way too many circumstances for Arizona to have to overcome here, once again, against this hungry, angry Seattle Seahawks football team.
And Seattle, sooner or later, they got to get Chris Carson back. And when they do, that is going to make them, then they're going to be back to being the complete dangerous offensive team they were the first month or so of the season. They're just not the same without Chris Carson, and they need him back big time. All right, let's talk about the first big one on our card as far as Sunday is concerned, and that is going to be, let's see. I'll tell you what. Let's talk about which game we're gonna go with. Oh, we're gonna go with the Baltimore game, Baltimore and Tennessee, because this is the revenge playoff game where Baltimore, of course, was the heavy favorite. They were a 10-point favorite in the playoff game, the conference playoff game. We all remember Tennessee running all over Baltimore's defense in that one, beating them easily by 16 points. So there's revenge there for Baltimore, coming off the upset loss to New England on Sunday Night Football. They get Pittsburgh, by the way, on Thursday night. So 4 days after this game, they've got the revenge game again against Pittsburgh, which is actually more important. But being 3 games behind Pittsburgh, every game is important now because Tennessee is also 6-3. So this is Baltimore's in a situation where if they lose this football game, they could be mathematically on the outside of the playoffs. That's how crazy this race is. So this is a huge game for both teams. I just don't like the way Baltimore has been as a favorite lately. They're only 1-4-1 against the spread. Their last 6 as a favorite. And Tennessee, on the other hand, I don't really. How can you like the way they played? Period. I mean, they're just not playing very well.
Well, neither of these teams are playing well right now. And, you do by comparative numbers, Baltimore's way down from where they were last year, offensively, defensively, and points scored. Tennessee is beginning to also make like Seattle and starting to bottom out here at this stage of the football season. So something's got to give in this football game. I'm going to point this out. We did this in our database about Lamar Jackson just not being right this year. And I don't know if it's an injury, if it's what he blames as being the play calling from the offensive coordinator, whatever it happens to be. But I do know this, that in his NFL career, he has beaten up on the Sisters of the Poor. He's 15-1 against losing teams. Against winning teams, when he's favored, he's 3-6 straight against the spread, and he's only 3-6 at home against winning teams as well. I think it's a step-up game for Baltimore here, and I think the pressure's squarely on the Ravens in the contest here. I'm going to lean to Tennessee here. I don't like that revenge. It's nasty, okay? When you lose as a double-digit home favorite in the first round of the playoffs and you come back and host that team the next year, you know that they've had this game circled in red ink and blood, has Baltimore. I just don't like the way they're playing right now, and it's not so much a case of being on Tennessee here. It's a case of the fact that Baltimore is not hitting on all cylinders right now, and I just can't lay points with them at this time.
Yeah, and speaking of big games coming up, and rematches, Tennessee will be taking on Indianapolis next week. So both of these teams have huge division rematches next week.
Yes.
Tennessee then will host Cleveland the week after that. So when you have that many really good teams fighting for playoffs, and then you throw New England in there too, that means that every week now for the rest of the season, you're going to have some really big matchups. And both of these teams have some really big matchups over the next few weeks. And one of those teams is the Patriots. And Patriots, and we talked about this last week, that the Patriots would be a really good upset play. And that's exactly what they were for me. That was my lone upset play. And now they're going to be my lone 5-star play. The way that they're set up now, they're starting to climb the ladder now. They're still at the early stages too. I don't even think they're halfway there yet. And they've got a couple of tough games on the schedule. They got the two in the division, and then they have Arizona, they have the LA Rams. So there's some tough games the Patriots still have to play. This isn't one of them. Not to say that Houston's not dangerous. Anytime you go up against Deshaun Watson, that's dangerous. But you have to take care of this, or else you're right back where you were last week when you had to win the game to stay alive. Because if you lose to Houston, you're pretty much done. You can't beat Houston. You're already 2 games back. You're probably going to be 3 games back. You're not catching anyone. So they're still showing you that they're a great foundation. Belichick, McDaniels, they all know what they're doing. They're getting some of their young players to get back and healthy and starting to learn the system and so forth. The offensive line is healthy. That's important. Cam Newton looks like he's now completely over COVID because there was something wrong with him a few weeks ago after he came back from it. And that maybe was part of it. And now you're taking a Houston team that is 0-6 against teams this season when they've been the dog. And you're only talking about giving up a point in this game. So why wouldn't I be all over New England in this spot?
I'm all over New England in this spot with you, Greg. I think it's a great matchup for Bill Belichick. You've got a myriad of things. We do a newsletter called the Midweek Alert. That's our statistical newsletter, like the Daily Racing Form. And if you compare these teams statistically this year, you'd insist New England's a 7-point favorite in the game. Much the better running game in this football contest here. Much the better head coach in this football game here. And a football team that has need and is still alive in the playoff chase against one that is flat out dead and almost buried. Houston's been outgained in 8 of their 9 football games this year, including each of the last 4 games in a row. And you look at Bill Belichick's record against the AFC South, he's dominated this division in the past. He's 38-12 against the division, 11-0 when he takes on a sub-400 team out inside that division here. I think this is a ton of numbers that all come to New England's favor here. Remember, the Patriots are trying to protect an 11-year streak of making the postseason. And I don't believe if they don't make it here, it's going to be a team like Houston that's going to stop this team.
Yeah.
It might end up being a better team down the road, but I don't believe it'll be the Houston Texans. And I think New England's going to build up confidence off that big win, that upset win over Tampa Bay. I like the Patriots with you in this contest.
Yeah, matter of fact, New England next week will host Arizona. So they got to take care of business when they need to against teams like Houston. All right, let's stay in the AFC East with the Miami Dolphins because the Dolphins were my 5-star pick last week, and I just didn't think they got any respect. 2-point favorite against the Chargers. I didn't understand it. In a way, I kind of did, but and look, I know where they're kind of at now. They're sort of like where Seattle was when they were winning, but they weren't winning the stat game. And I get that. No question. Tua needs to play better. He's a rookie. He's going to have his ups and his downs, probably more downs than ups. He's not Joe Burrow. He's just not. That's the reason he wasn't the first pick overall. But he's a talented kid. But what I like about this game, again, and sticking with Miami, is because of also who they're playing. And I think if Denver wins or covers this game, I think they have to play the best football that they played in over a month. And I think the Dolphins have got to maybe Tua's got to throw a couple of picks. The defense doesn't come up with any turnovers. Okay, that could happen. This is the NFL, no question. Denver's won a couple of games this year that no one thought they would. But I just think when you have 2 teams going in opposite directions, I'm still going to stay with that one team against the bad team until something breaks. And I'm going to ride Miami again this week. And Flores, the first time he's been a road favorite, which is not a surprise that we know how bad they were last year. This is important. He's 5-0 against the spread when he takes on a team coming off a double-digit loss. So I think what that tells us is that when you look at the film after they play a team that got beat up the week before, hey, I can get this team prepared. They're not going to sleep on this opponent. And the defense and special teams, they're all in sync. They're playing with, they're like in a zone right now, collectively as a team. Maybe the zone ends on Sunday, maybe it doesn't. But like I said, I'm going to ride it until the zone breaks.
I can understand completely if you've been riding the Miami Dolphins. There's no sense in hopping off the merry-go-round right now, especially against the likes of a Denver Bronco football team that's really underachieved this year. But again, I'm going to harken back to what they've done and the way they've gotten the job done. They're 3-0 straight up into the number with Tua behind center, despite the fact they've been out-yarded 150 yards a game in those 3 victories. That ends up biting at someone at some point in the season, and I think it will in their first road favorite role. You've also got the Denver Broncos here coming home here. They've been outstanding as non-divisional home dogs when they're coming off a division game. They're 16-1 against the spread in this role, winning 14 of those underdog games straight up. And when they take on an 800 or less opponent in this role, they're 13-1 straight up and 14-0 against the spread. I'm going to play the numbers with Denver in the football contest here and make Miami play a complete game before I, at this point, hop back on the Miami Dolphins here. But right now, I'm a little bit suspect. I realize that Tua has been a great spark for this team here, more like a cheerleading quarterback, if you will. He's gotten the job done. They're really happy with what they've seen here so far. But the numbers don't match the results. And until the numbers match the results, the cuffs don't match the collars, I'm going to play Denver in this game and fade Miami.
Yeah, part of the reason why I feel still good about Miami is because that you get these situations, and I think we saw it with Seattle, is that you get beat up by the stats, and maybe you're winning because you're scoring a late touchdown after you're down late, like we saw that with New England, and other situations where, hey, you're barely able to hold on because your defense stinks, whatever. But Miami, in their 5-game winning streak, straight up and against the spread, have won those 5 games by 14 points. That is a huge window where even if they have a game where they got to come back to life a little bit, I got a 14-point window. I can still kind of play around with that a little bit. Maybe they win by 5 or 6. That's okay. I'm giving 3. So I think that is the other reason why I'm pretty confident of the way things are going in Miami. And here's a guy that should get recognition for AFC Defensive Player of the Year, and that's Emmanuel Ogba. He has been playing tremendous, former Cleveland Brown. He's having a breakout season.
Yes, he is. He's doing a terrific job. He's helped that Miami defense come together here, and that's what's really worked hand in hand in tandem with Tua Tagovailoa being their quarterback. They're getting some outstanding defensive play here as well. I'm going to say this also here about Drew Lock, the quarterback for the Denver Broncos. I'm not a big Drew Lock fan, okay? I think he's serviceable. He's getting the job done for the Denver Broncos, and he was beat like a piñata last week in that game against Las Vegas. Las Vegas only had 9 sacks in the year last year, and they teed off against him last week unbelievably. So Denver's offensive line is going to have to do a much, much better job against this vastly improving Miami defensive line. But in Locke's career as a starter in the National Football League, he's been behind center 4 times when the Broncos have come off a double-digit beating. He's won and covered all 4 games the next football game. So it's sort of a reactionary thing. When Denver looks really bad, people want to fade him.
That's a good stat, yeah.
Yes, they want to fade him, and now he's at home in this underdog role here. So, I'm going to play the quarterback stat, the situation, and fade the Miami stats until Miami once again proves to me that they are indeed a legitimate playoff contending team.
All right, now let's go to a huge game. Could be considered the game of the week, and that is Green Bay at Indianapolis. Green Bay had to rally and hold on to beat the Jags last week, but that's what happens sometimes with those big point spreads. You just never know. That's why I hate those double-digit point spreads. Sometimes, oh yeah, I should have taken that game. That looked real easy. They won by 40. But then, 50% of the time, you're like, oh, how did that happen? How did Jacksonville almost win the game? It's just the NFL. It just, anything can happen, especially when you take your foot off the brakes. But one of the other things could be the fact that Aaron Rodgers, as you guys have really hammered home, just doesn't perform very well, or his teams just don't perform very well in November. And that continues in this game against Indianapolis. His numbers are just so bad in this month, or the team is bad in this month with him under center. And now you're taking on this Colt team that their defense, again, with Leonard back, you can see the difference. They're night and day. So they're going to attack Green Bay. I think Green Bay is going to have to work harder than they've had to in weeks offensively. And the Colts coming off just that huge win. They got the big game coming up next week again in the division, which we talked about. The Colts mathematically are in first place, but they know they could lose this game. They could be back to maybe even being out of the playoffs. This is a much more important game for the Colts than it is for the Packers, too.
I believe it is as well. And I'm going to reiterate that I'm a big Frank Reich fan, and I like him in this particular situation here. You mentioned Aaron Rodgers. We don't want to beat that November horse to death, but I'll throw one more stat out there, that in the month of November in non-division games when he's been on the road, okay, He's 0-8 straight up and 1-7 against the spread against 600 or better non-division foes on the road. He's really, really struggled that way in this particular situation here. You look at the Colts in this contest here. The last 8 games they've been at home against NFC teams, they've won and covered 7 of those 8 football games. And in fact, against the NFC North in particular, when the NFC North comes in off a win, the Colts are 8-1 against the spread. I think this is a real good spot for the Colts here. When we wrote the game up in the Playbook newsletter early, Green Bay had opened up as the favorite in the football game, and I was going to be on Indianapolis like white on rice in the football contest, but then they shifted to the favorite. And I can understand what the line move there was all about, but you still basically have Indianapolis in a win situation, much like New England and Houston in a win situation. And I'm going to look at the team that I think is going to win the football game. In my mind, it's the Indianapolis Colts.
I thought it was funny. I think it was Jason Lacaforta who said, what did he say? He said that he thought going into last week's game that the Colts should bench Phillip Rivers. I mean,
really?
Yeah. And this was him. Yeah. Did he have a bad game against Baltimore? Yes. But the whole offense had a bad game. He wasn't the one who turned the ball over for the touchdown. That was Jonathan Taylor who fumbled the ball for the touchdown. The 2 weeks prior, he threw for over 300 yards and was just starting to look like the quarterback that the Colts wanted to pick up in the twilight of his career. See if they can get one more run out of Phillip Rivers for a Super Bowl. You didn't think it was going to happen overnight. It's going to take time. It's going to take a little bit of time. You'd never been in Indianapolis before. You'd never been outside of the Chargers organization. Finally, he starts to pick things up. And then last week's game. So if you throw out the Baltimore game, in his last 3 wins, he has thrown for 941 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 1 pick. Yeah, that's a guy that I want to hand over the reins to Jacoby Brissett.
I think CBS should bench Jason LaCorta.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I think should happen.
I agree.
Here. To make an idiotic statement like that, I think that's the kind of a writer that writes just to kind of want to upset the apple cart and get people talking at the water fountain. What's that?
Clickbait.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah.
I mean,
ridiculous.
Yeah.
He thinks Jacoby Brissett didn't get a fair shot. Like, come on. We saw him the whole year.
He got more than a fair shot.
Yes.
Okay. They're thrilled to have him on the roster. Okay. He's a really great
backup. Yes.
Very good backup quarterback. You saw how ecstatic they were in a football game that he won and he threw a pass and a winning pass. He's really, really well liked in the team, but they signed Phillip Rivers for a reason and a purpose, like you said, to get that last hurrah out of him and help push them closer to the end zone and get into the football playoffs here. And they're going to do just that this football season here. Again, I think this is a great spot for Indianapolis in this contest here. And they also benefit from this here as well, Greg. They come off of a win on a Thursday football game. And NFL football teams that win on Thursday and go into the next game the following week on a Sunday with the benefit of that extra rest have done very, very well, especially if they've come off a high-scoring effort. They scored 32 or more points. They're 16-4 straight up and 15-5 to the spread. That's a nice little ancillary role, if you will, for Indianapolis in the football game as well. Hence, Indianapolis in a win situation, I'll be on the Colts.
Last week I was doing one of the other shows with Ryan Dunleavy of the Post, and we coincidentally talked about the need for the Colts to make sure that Nyheim Hines gets more carries. Couldn't get the fact that you have Taylor, and then you're going to Wilkins. Like, what are you doing with Hines? I get he can't be a workhorse. He's not big enough. I understand that. But you can't hand off the ball to him 10 or 12 times a game. That's not going to kill the guy. And finally, he led the team in carries. I think he had like 12 carries, and he had a huge game. He made huge plays. He's a playmaker. He's the best running back they have, all purpose, but they got to get the ball in his hands. You can't just have him as a receiver all the time out of the backfield. That's too predictable. Hand the ball off to him. They finally gave him the ball a little bit as a running back. He shows you what he could do. I think they need to do that more.
I agree 100%. Adjustments are made and good coaches make those adjustments. We're going to find out whether it happens or not. But again, when you've got at this stage of the football season here, we're in the second half, and we've got this intriguing AFC NFC matchups here. Will these two teams meet in the Super Bowl? Probably not. But will these two teams be a playoff team? Most likely so, which guarantees a football game that's going to be played at playoff intensity. And what more can you ask for on a Sunday in the National Football League?
All right, let's go to another key game. And this is actually going to be my lone upset pick of the week. And I actually think this is an easy upset choice, and that is Atlanta over New Orleans. I got an opportunity, like everybody, to see Jameis Winston play last week, and I was, wow. I mean, besides the uniform look, he just didn't look good. Now he'll get all the reps. That'll help him, no question. Maybe he'll get that bump you talk about, the backup bump. I get that. That could happen, no question. But I think if you're looking for a team as a good upset play at 2-1, I think this is it. I mean, you got an Atlanta team playing like they did last year in the second half of the season. They're playing good football again under Raheem Morris. They're a dangerous team, and Jameis Winston, you can't be. This isn't Teddy Bridgewater. I mean, I don't. He's got to prove it to me. And I'm sorry. I think this is a perfect spot. They beat the Saints last year as a 14-point dog in New Orleans. First time they beat him in I think 5 tries, but still they did show them they could beat him in New Orleans last year, even when they didn't have as good as a team, or the momentum wasn't as good. I just think this is a good spot to take an underdog and go with the money line.
I'm with you in this football game here. I would have probably put a gun to my head, rather had Drew Brees in the game and take a few more points with Atlanta in the football contest, if for no other reason because New Orleans tends to choke like a dog at home laying points in division football games. They're going to be doing just that again on Sunday, laying a few less points, obviously, with Jameis Winston behind center. But when Jameis Winston's been a favorite in the NFL, he's 7-14-1 against the spread. Never been much of a chalk player, and he's 12-21-2 against the spread at home in his NFL career. What he is, to me, is a cousin of DeShone Kizer. Okay, he's a human turnover machine. In his 74 NFL football games, he's thrown 88 interceptions.
That's ugly.
That's 3.4% in a career interception rate. That's amongst the worst of any National Football League quarterback going back in history. Okay, but when they acquired him, you ask why would you make a move in signing or getting a player like this for a backup quarterback? Well, he's the only quarterback in NFL history to ever lead the league in passing yards one year and be traded the next year. So, he does some good things, some things well. That's airing the ball out. But I can go back to his days at Florida State, watch those football games intently, and ask myself, what are you throwing that pass for? He consistently threw into coverage at Florida State, but he got away with it there.
Yep.
Okay, you're not getting away with it with these defensive backs in the National Football League. They pick up on that right away. So I think New Orleans has got that to overcome in this football contest. And as you mentioned, Atlanta playing a lot like they did last year, the second half of the football season here, especially since Morris has taken over here. The Falcons 5-1 to the spread the last 6 division road games. I'm with you. I think Atlanta plus the points is the play. And if they pull the upset, like you, I'm not surprised.
Okay, now the primetime games as far as the weekend, you have Kansas City Sunday night. And this is just a really good spot to take the Chiefs. On my book, they're 6.5. I buy the half point. I got them at 6. They're definitely going to be one of my top plays. They are in a revenge spot. They're off a bye. You know how good Andy Reid is as far as that's concerned. There's so many trends and numbers that work to the favor of Kansas City, including the one that we've already used this season. They're 16-4 against the spread in their last 20 versus division opponents on the road. So this is something they're familiar with. Plus, the Raiders are on a 3-game winning streak. They've kind of they've reached their limit. They are what they are, and now they're stepping up in class, taking on a team they beat already. Super Bowl championship team they beat already, who wants revenge. They're going to get it. And the fact that I only have to give up 6 points, I'm pretty stoked about that.
Well, there's the story out there circulating also that Andy Reid was really miffed at that loss against the Raiders when the Raiders rode a team bus and circled the stadium like it was a victory lap and it was a Super Bowl parade.
Yeah.
And
That whole thing is just, I mean, first Gruden comes out and basically says the reason we did that was to shove it to the bus driver. Because he wanted to make him drive around the thing a couple of times because he was saying some crap maybe when they were leaving for the game. Who knows? But I just found it funny that Reed actually said something. What was it? His response was something along the lines of, "That's not our style." Oh, you mean you're above that? You mean like when you're like a 20-point favorite against a winless team and you fake a fake punt? Yeah, you're like one of those classy teams, right?
yeah.
Yeah, okay. Come on.
Well, it's Andy Reid and he's PO'd. That's all I can tell you.
That's all that we need. That's right. That's all our
That's
bank
all
account
we need.
cares about.
Andy Reid's PO'd. He's going to ensure his best effort from the football
That's
team.
right.
If you look at the Chiefs on the road off back-to-back wins in an AFC game, they're 12-0-1 to the spread the last 13 times doing that. And here come the Raiders back home, feeling awfully good about themselves, looking like, are you kidding me here? At home with rest, 3-11 to the spread, including when they're on a 3-0 ATS run. 0-3 as a dog. A lot of bad numbers working against the Raiders in this football game, and the fact that this is a home game for them. To that I say, who cares? There's nobody going to be in the stands that's going to let the Raiders know that it's a home game for them in this football game here. I think the key stat here is the fact that they did beat Kansas City in embarrassing fashion to begin early on in the football season here. They lost as an 11-point home favorite. That will get Kansas City's attention. It's got mine. I'm laying the points in this game.
Kansas City also, they've covered 7 straight versus division opponents off of a double-digit win, like Las Vegas, who clobbered Denver last week. And they've also covered 6 straight with revenge after they had an ATS loss. So there's a lot of things to like about Kansas City in this one. Vegas, by the way, has dropped 7 straight covers after they've played the Denver Broncos. Chiefs will be at Tampa Bay next week. So there's a huge matchup that we'll be looking forward to. All right. Now with the Monday Night Football game. And this is just this one, Tampa Bay over the last few weeks, I'm at the point where I can't touch this team right now. I don't know what you're going to get out of this team from week to week. Part of me thinks, okay, well, yeah, Tampa Bay and Bowles, and they're going to blitz the hell out of Goff in this one. You can be sure about that. And I can't trust Goff, and I get it. I'm there. But you know what? I'm not sure that I can trust Tampa Bay with Aaron Donald and that offensive line that had big problems against the Saints. And now they're taking on this Ram defense, which is extremely underrated. And I said this on the Jet Show, actually, that there are a couple of defensive coordinators that I would look at, even though I kind of don't want to go back there because the Jets, Gase is the only offensive coordinator they've hired, I think, since Pete Carroll. And I kind of want to go back to an offensive guy. But if they go to defense for their next coach, it's either Saleh for San Francisco, who everybody knows, but nobody really knows this LA Ram dude. He's like 37 years old. He's a Vic Fangio disciple, and he has been dialing it up. He is the main reason why the Rams are in the position they're in. Not Jared Goff. It's the defense. The defense has been fantastic. Jalen Ramsey's had a fine season, but they got this other corner that's nobody knows of that's having a fantastic season. So that's why I'd be worried to take Tampa Bay in this spot because of LA's defense.
LA's defense is really one of the most under-the-radar defenses in the National Football League right now for all of the reasons you just mentioned here. They're playing outstanding, coming into this football game feeling very confident about themselves. They've cashed 6 of the last 7 games in the series when they've taken on the Bucs, 4-0 at Tampa Bay. So the travel factor is not going to be much here in this Monday Night Football game. You also take a look at Tampa, just 2-10 to the spread when they're favored against teams out of the NFC West. I think this is a real good spot here for the Rams to come in here, especially with Tampa feeling really good about themselves. Now believing that Antonio Brown's going to be a missing link to fit into the offense here. He had 7 receptions for 69 yards last week, so he did help the offense. But it's being priced accordingly. Tampa Bay off that big win. They doubled up on Carolina last week. 30 first downs, 544 yards in the football contest. makes them look all of a sudden to be a premier team in the NFC once again. I think one of the premier teams in the NFC happens to be the underdog LA Rams, who I think they're going to be a football team that's not going to lose too many games from here moving forward here. I think they upset the Tampa Bay Bucks Monday night.
Well, look at who they've had problems with. They've had problems with teams that have really dominated the line of scrimmage. The Saints did it. The Bears did it. And I could definitely see the Rams doing it. So,
Yep.
Interesting. It shows you how times have changed so quickly. Tampa Bay last year, we all remember this game. They upset the Rams last year when the Rams were 3-0. They upset them 55-40. I mean, that was one of those games that just came from nowhere from Tampa Bay, Jameis Winston. And it actually, I think that's like started the downward spiral, I believe, of the Rams last season, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, that was. Oh, and by the way, the Rams it's interesting to note they're 0-2 straight up and against the spread versus winning teams on the road this year. It's only the third time they're playing on the road versus a winning team. They lost to Buffalo and they lost to Miami. So if they win this game, they're going to need their defense to show up, no question. I don't trust Jared Goff in this spot.
Well, I can't blame you. I mean, we're not talking anything at all about the Rams' offense here. It's all about their under-the-radar defense coming into the football contest here. And again, I think Sean McVay's got this team situationally placed perfectly. They're like a racehorse that's rating real well right now, getting ready for the close of this second half of the football season here. They're coming all into play, into being here this football season here right now. And again, I'm going to go on the record as saying, this football team could run the table going out this football season here, and I think this will be one of those wins that they'll pick up along the way.
And keep remember the name Brandon Staley, the defensive coordinator for the Rams, because unfortunately, you're gonna, or fortunately, whatever. But if you have a situation where if you were to get hired, and say an African American coach didn't get hired over Staley. It'll happen. But some teams might just go, hey, I'd rather hire the Staley guy because I don't want to give up 2 third-round draft picks to the Kansas City Chiefs for Eric Bieniemy.
For sure. And, he's young, he's energetic like that. But are you giving up on Adam Gase? Is that what I'm hearing here?
Me personally? I'm just being, what would you say, realistic.
Yes, I understand.
Yeah, just being realistic. Quickly, the 2 games we talked about, the Eagles at Cleveland and Cincinnati at Washington. NFC East teams versus AFC North teams. I just think the deciding factor in my mind is I'm just going to throw everything else out the window, and I'm taking the 2 teams from the AFC North.
I don't blame you. The Cleveland-Philadelphia game is what we call the Eric Berry Bowl. He's the first-year general manager for the Browns. He came over from Philadelphia, so he's going to want this football game. And there's a great little stat inside this for the way the teams are playing right now. The Cleveland Browns have held their last 2 opponents to season-low yardage marks. The Philadelphia Eagles have allowed season-high yardage marks in 2 of their last 3 football games. So statistically, at least from a defensive aspect, you've got 2 teams going in opposite directions. The big concern, the news here today as we do the show, is Cleveland also had 3 cases of COVID that broke out in camp here today on Wednesday. So one of them, Jack Conklin, offensive lineman, Cody Parkey, their place kicker. So we'll see whether or not this game even plays. But if it does, I'm with you on the Cleveland Browns in the contest.
By the way, the Eagles 2-1 as a dog in their last 3. So they're not in a favored role. So that's good. And the Browns have dropped 4 straight covers. Meanwhile, Cincinnati 6-1 against the spread. The Redskins have not covered a game as a home favorite since 2017.
Well, it's been a long while between drinks of water for the Redskins in that particular role, but now they're in their class element here. They were against the Giants and any other team, for all intents and purposes, out of the NFC East. But I'm going to say that I'm going to run with Alex Smith here. He had a terrific game last game. He set personal highs in that football contest and could well have won the game. Didn't do just that. I think he's an offensive spark for this football team here, Washington. I like their numbers. They're a little bit hidden here. And Cincinnati was beat from pillar to post in that football game last week. I think Washington is the right side in this contest.
Minnesota, Mike Zimmer, he's back. because they've got their next three opponents are a combined 6-22. So we could see the Vikings at 7-5 in the next 3 weeks, and that puts them right there with a great chance to make the playoffs in the NFC, and the trends start working for them once again in this spot against the Cowboys. I know it's 7 points, but we are talking the Cowboys.
Yeah, we're talking the Cowboys, who, for all intents and purposes, have thrown in the towel. If you want to look at this game statistically, you'd think that maybe the wrong team's favored here, just given the fact that in Dallas's 9 games this year, they've won the yard 6 times.
Yeah.
And Minnesota's been pushed around on the field in the stats that way this year. So that way it favors the Dallas Cowboys. But we're going to harken back to Mike Zimmer and his best rule of all, and that's in non-division games as a favorite, 23-3 straight up, 25-1 against the spread. Can't jump in front of those numbers.
Mark, appreciate it as always. Playbook.com. That's where we want everybody to go for everything. You mentioned the midweek newsletter. You've, of course, got the regular weekly newsletter that comes out every Wednesday morning. You've got the emails that come out every day and so much more at playbook.com. So that's the place to send them.
That's true, Greg. And when you're there, check out my weekly ATS Against the Spread podcast there as well. Not quite as good as this podcast,
of course not.
Because no, but this is more of an audio podcast, a video podcast. So it's nice people can see us as they hear us. But all those newsletters available online each week at playbook.com.
We're just too good looking to keep.
There you go.
Yeah, to keep everybody away from looking at us every week. So we do our best. Mark, appreciate it. We'll talk to you when we get ready for Week 12 of the NFL season.
We'll look forward to that, Greg. Have a great week. Be well, stay safe, and I'll catch you next week.